Chapter 18. Attack of the Killer Drones. Everyone at the school looked forward to Hero Day, the day of the PCAT test, more than any other. Everyone except the first years, that is. For them, it was a terrifying jump into the unknown that no one would tell them much about. For the rest, however, it was a chance to watch the younger kids take on an almost impossible assault course. It was a bit like watching a bunch of people jump into a freezing cold lake when you're already out, wrapped in a warm towel, and enjoying a hot chocolate. Rows of tiered seating had been set up on the playing fields for the spectators, with wooden benches for the competitors. Boxes of rosettes and medals were being lugged up to the fields by some of Mr. Flash's least favourite students. He quite liked the irony of the least capable carrying awards for the most capable. But then again, he would, wouldn't he? Not that many awards got handed out anyway. Most years, only 3 or 4 students got to the end of the PCAT assault course. A course which the first years were now regarding nervously. It stretched the entire length of the playing fields, and it looked terrifying. Impossibly high climbing nets were slung from wooden posts, and beyond that there was a fence of vicious-looking barbed wire. Further in the distance there was a tunnel to crawl through, which seemed to be full of smoke, and right in front of their terrified eyes was a line of stout straw dummies with thick rope arms. Deborah Lamington and Dirk Scott, a.k.a. The Posse, were also ready to take part. Deborah was positioned at the back of the playing fields, not far from Carl's workshops, behind a large pile of brightly coloured plastic hula hoops. Dirk, holding 2 thick foam pads as tall as himself, was standing beside the pavilion, expectantly. "Right!" barked Mr. Flash, marching up and down in front of the nervous line of first years. "This course has been expertly designed by me to test your abilities to the limit. Whether you're a skimmer, super strong, or you've got a mental cape like Teletech, you should be able to figure out a way to get around most of these obstacles. Even if your capability is," he increased in volume slightly and glanced at Hilda, "utterly, completely useless, you may still be able to find a way through. Think about your cape and try to fit it to the problem you're facing. But remember, this has been designed to simulate the conditions of a real mission. So just like in the real world, you're on your own. Don't expect anyone to back you up, and don't stop to help out the weaker ones. Only the very best will end up in my class next year and stand any chance of joining the Heroes Alliance. Most of you don't have a hope in heck. Good luck!" And with that, Mr. Flash darted over to Deborah at the other side of the field in a fraction of a second. The first years could see him talking to her in the distance. Over on the tiers of wooden seating, Mr. Superman rose to his feet and addressed the whole school, holding a microphone to his mouth. "Welcome everyone to the PCAT test. We're all looking forward to seeing how many of our first years can complete the course this year." There was a chorus of jeers and shouts from the rest of the school. Clearly they didn't think many people would be getting to the finish line. Mr. Superman quelled them with a wave of his right bicep. "Settle down, everyone. Right, Mr. Drench, are you ready?" Mr. Drench was standing in the centre of the course with a clipboard, apparently ready to assess the first year's performance as they struggled with the obstacles. He waved a hand. "Excellent," continued the head teacher. "Well, I think we can ask Mrs. Fletcher to sound the starting horn as soon as Mr. Flash is ready." The librarian was sitting at the corner of the stands, looking expectant. Mr. Flash, who a second ago had been talking to Deborah, was suddenly back in front of the class again. He bent to whisper something to Dirk Scott, who lifted his foam pads and abruptly darted out of sight. "Ready!" screamed Mr. Flash at the class. Nobody said they were ready, but a second later he made a chopping motion with his arm. This was Mrs. Fletcher's cue. When the librarian's foghorn head. "Go!" screamed Mr. Flash at blood-tearing volume. He started pushing the first years one by one towards the line of straw dummies. They had now started spinning at incredible speed, their outstretched rope arms whistling as they cut through the air. At the other side of the field, Deborah Lamington picked up her hula hoops and started skimming them across the course. They came fizzing along at around head height, forcing everyone to duck and weave ran towards the dummies. Charlie, the boy who could burn muffins with his eyes, reached them first. For a moment, it looked like he was going to use his cape on the dummies and set one on fire, but almost immediately he got a thick rope arm in the face and fell over backwards, stunned. Everyone else hung back nervously until Dirk Scott appeared behind them and started jabbing them all forward with his foam pads.
"This is why none of you are ever going to get taken on by the Alliance!"
screamed Mr. Flash.
"Isn't anybody going to use their cape for Pete's sake? What's the matter with you all?"
Mary, Billy, Nellie, and Hilda were clustered together on one side of the course. Mary thought about flying over the obstacles, but every time she looked up, a bright plastic hoop skimmed above her head. One of Billy's hands inflated suddenly and he fell over sideways. Nellie kept her head down, hair covering her face.
"I wish Murph was here,"
muttered Hilda to herself.
"He always makes me feel better."
The first of Nectar's 4 attack vehicles smashed through the school gates and skidded to a halt on the concrete area outside the main doors. Nectar climbed out of the passenger seat and surveyed the empty buildings, his huge attack wasps detaching themselves from the roofs of the trucks to hover beside him, bristling with firepower.
"Come in, Knox. It doesn't look like anyone's here."
The voice of Nicholas Knox crackled in his earpiece.
"My spies indicate that the assault course is taking place on the grass area behind the school, Lord Nectar. All the students and teachers are assembled. It couldn't be more perfect for me."
He coughed, and Nectar's earpiece crackled annoyingly.
"For you,"
Knox corrected himself.
"I do beg your pardon. If you use the drones to transport yourself over the school buildings, we should have the element of surprise. I can direct you to the best preliminary targets."
Back at the PCAT assault course, Mr. Flash was still yelling at the class.
"Use your capabilities, you useless lot! Come on! Think!"
But there wasn't much time to think, with hula hoops flying around and dummies spinning in front of you. It was like a really weird dream, only one in which you actually got hit on the head. A lot of the class was struggling to understand how this was supposed to relate to a real-life situation.
"Sir?"
asked Elsa breathlessly after one of Deborah's missiles had knocked her to the ground.
"Do you come up against many flying hoops working as a crime-fighting superhero?"
"Shut up!"
screamed Mr. Flash, going so red he looked like a hairy-lipped lobster. Suddenly, there was a fizz and a spark from the electrical wire leading to the dummies, and they gradually stopped spinning. The class began to shove their way through.
"That's more like it,"
said Mr. Flash, going a slightly more normal colour.
"Was that you, Timmy boy?"
Timothy, the boy with the capability to control electrical items, gave him a thumbs up. Now, usually, if a man dressed in yellow and black appears above your school roof, feet balanced on the backs of 2 huge robot wasps, you would notice. But in the middle of a savage assault course set by a maniac, you could easily miss it, and indeed, most of the class did, as they concentrated instead on tackling the second obstacle, a wide ditch that you had to swing across using ropes, except the ropes were on fire. Nectar looked down across the field, scanning for likely targets as he spoke into his remote control.
"Attack drones, engage mind control helmets. Prepare for combat and assimilation."
A hatch towards the back of each of the 4 drones opened, and 4 of Knox's yellow helmets were lowered into attack position. His earpiece crackled.
"Focus on the teacher first, Lord Nectar," said Knox's voice. "He is quite an impressive specimen. The man with the large moustache by the wooden building."
Nectar saw Mr. Flash at once, who was standing alone by the pavilion, bellowing something to Elsa about freezing the rope and leaving everyone else behind. Nectar spoke into his attack drone control unit.
"Target the shouting bald man to our right. Enslave him."
Before Mr. Flash, or indeed anyone else, had noticed what was happening, one of the drones was hovering above him. A yellow helmet was lowered onto his head, and his shouting stopped abruptly as the lights along the sides of it winked on. Mr. Flash's eyes emptied, then went a frightening shade of black and yellow.
"Welcome to the hive, my friend,"
murmured Nectar, who had landed beside him.
That's bees, Lord Nectar,
said Nox's voice in his ear, but Nectar ignored it. Instead, he had some instructions from Mr. Flash.
You are now servants to Lord Nectar, human drone, and you will help me to enslave and capture everyone at this school.
I obey, Lord Nectar,
Said Mr. Flash in a monotone.
Begin with the most powerful. Who else has a power like yours, human drone?
Demanded Nectar as a hula hoop skimmed past them.
El Bandito has my power,
Said the teacher, pointing at Dirk Scott, who had reappeared behind the first years to prod them towards the burning ropes. But just then, Dirk looked back over his shoulder and saw what was going on. He took in Mr. Flash with his blank eyes and the weirdly costumed man by his side who seemed to be giving him instructions. This didn't look good. As an attack drone whizzed towards him, already lowering a helmet, Dirk raced into action.
Debs, get the Halo unit. We've got to warn the Alliance,
He shouted as he sprinted with superhuman speed across the field towards his friend. He glanced back over his shoulder to check the position of the attack drones. 2 were following him. As he reached the edge of the woods, he looked around.
Debs! You will be a servant of Lord Nectar,
Droned the voice of Deborah Lamington, and before Dirk could move, a rope had been thrown around him, pinning his arms to his sides. Deborah walked around to face him. She wore a yellow helmet fixed over her dark hair. Her eyes were wide and staring, their whites an eerie yellow with a jet black center.
Embrace your destiny.
She hissed at him.
Join us.
Dirk was powerless. An attack wasp lowered a helmet over his head, and he too became a helpless slave. With Mr. Flash and the posse on his side, Nectar had rapidly gained the upper hand. He had 2 fully operational heroes on his side, backed up by 4 huge, heavily armed drones. Mr. Superman's super strength could have presented a problem, but Deborah's first action after trapping Dirk was to grab a large stone lying on the ground and throw it. It rose in an elegant arc above the school, then curved back on itself like a boomerang until it landed with a nasty-sounding crack on the side of the head's head. He collapsed like a sack of onions dropped by a clumsy onion sack carrier. Hemmed in by the huge attack drones and up against such powerful slaves, the rest of the school didn't have much time to plan a fight back. A few tried to run, but were quickly headed off by Dirk or Mr. Flash, who were easily able to overtake them and shove them back. Within 5 terrifying minutes, it was over. Students and teachers herded together at gunpoint like apprehensive sheep in front of the pavilion.
Just in case anyone gets any more clever ideas, watch carefully.
Threatened Nectar, pointing to the row of dummies at the front of the assault course.
Attack drones, eliminate!
The noise of the drone's engines changed pitch as they wheeled around in the air, and with a deafening clatter, they opened fire. Straw flew in all directions as bullets ripped the figures apart. A huge roar followed as one of the drones fired a huge jet of flame across the whole scene, reducing the dummies to a row of blackened, charred poles. Everyone decided at the same moment that it might not be the right time to be a hero. As the last motes of straw fluttered to the ground, Nectar shouted peevishly,
I know, you don't have to keep nagging me.
Several people turned to look at him quizzically.
I wasn't talking to you, prisoners.
He snapped at them. In fact, he'd been talking to Nicholas Knox, who kept reminding him in his ear that he needed to select the best candidates to enslave, then clear out with the rest of his prisoners before the police arrived. But Nectar was reluctant to rush home. If we're honest, he was enjoying having some independence for once. It was surprisingly nice to be out and about enslaving people and burning stuff instead of being cooped up in his lair with Knox trying to upstage him all the time. Ah, well, he thought to himself, no rest for the wicked. I hate picnics.
You,
He snapped at Mr. Flash.
bald human drone.
I am ready to serve, Master,
Intoned Mr. Flash.
Identify the strongest and most powerful candidates for enslavement.
Ordered Nectar.
The rest will be imprisoned until we can build more mind control helmets and add them to the army.
These students show potential,
replied Mr. Flash, indicating gangly Fuzzface and his 4 misshapen cohorts. Before they could protest, the posse cornered them as mind control helmets were lowered onto their heads.
This teacher is a former hero known as the Weasel,
revealed Mr. Flash. Mr. Drench was hauled out of the crowd, and his eyes, too, became staring, yellow and black orbs.
Police have left their base to respond to reports of gunfire, Mighty Nectar.
Mr. Drench Drone informed his new master.
They will arrive here in approximately 4 minutes. No, wait.
He cocked his head and listened intently.
4 minutes and 48 seconds. I just heard a traffic light go red. Right,
fussed Nectar.
Nox, how many mind control helmets do we have left?
4, sir,
crackled Nox in his ear.
and I do suggest you hurry.
Why does he insist on patronizing me, thought Nectar. I hate picnics.
Okay. Attack drones, enslave the following people,
He ordered, beginning to feel slightly panicky, like when you're late for a train or something and the tops of your legs go all weird. He scanned the crowd for victims, and his insect eyes rested on 4 figures conveniently huddled together over to one side.
These 4. Enslave them,
Instructed Nectar, flailing a finger in the direction of Mary, Billy, Nellie, and Hilda. Billy whimpered in panic, inadvertently inflating his left elbow. Porkbelly, who was closest to them, chimed in.
They are of no operational use, Mighty Lord Nectar. These children are referred to as the Super Zeros because of their weakness and lack of potential.
All right,
Panicked Nectar. What is the point of a slave army, I hate picnics, he thought to himself, if they start arguing back?
That large boy over there, then. He looks hefty.
He continued, now picking people out almost at random.
I don't know. Those 3?
Indicating some muscly-looking final-year students. And with that, 4 final pairs of eyes morphed into glazed yellow and black pools, and Nectar's attack was complete. His slaves began herding everyone round to the front of the school, and Mr. Flash brought up the rear, carrying the still unconscious Mr. Superman over his shoulder. The trucks were standing ready, with their back doors open and their engines running.
All prisoners into the vehicles at once,
Ordered Nectar sharply.
Attack drones, prepare to destroy on sight anyone who tries to run or fight back. Oh, look at the tiny horses.
Everyone immediately turned to look at the 2 small white horses that were cantering across the schoolyard, tossing their miniature manes and clopping their delicate hooves in an impressive display of small-scale dressage. The prisoners watched out of simple curiosity. Nectar's human slaves and even his robotic attack and spy drones all looked because he'd just ordered them to. After a final canter, the horses disappeared with a tiny neigh. Everyone went, "Aww," in a disappointed way.
Right, into the vehicles then. Come on.
Nectar ordered, and the prisoners were pushed and pulled and threatened into the back of the trucks. The attack drones locked themselves onto their specially adapted racks on the top of each of the 4 vehicles. The spy drones whirred into the sky and headed back to base. Doors slammed, tires screeched, and within moments, the schoolyard was empty. There were no witnesses around to read the words Ribbon Robotics on the lorries that roared away down the road. Nor was there anyone around to see the 4 small figures who floated back down to earth a few seconds later, all clinging tightly to the handle of a single yellow umbrella.